Hey guys, well this is what the sky looked like on Saturday morning. I think it was the same in quite a few places, and we went to this place, Bradford on Avon, which is a small town in West Wiltshire by the Somerset border, and we live in Wiltshire now, in the Shire, and my daughter works in Bradford and wanted to sort of show me a little bit of it. But I thought I'd have a little look at the station first because they're saying this was built in 1848, and the word build means a lot of things. I covered this a few years ago. I think they probably just put a roof on and did what they had to do, and I strongly suspect that there was a canal here. I think there were a lot of canals about, but you can see this is the sort of stone that a lot of the buildings here are made of. This has got like the stone surrounds in the window, which isn't really the sort of thing they were doing in Victorian times. A lot of filled in areas where something else was on there at some point. Here, look here, a lot of reparation been going on this old building, and a similar one over the way there. See how quiet it is here, look. There was only us at the train station. This is when we were going back a bit later, and I'm just tying it in. That's a modern wall, and up here you can see that it's got this sort of like square little windows here. They're not glazed at all, and this sort of block brickwork, but there's quite an interesting little roof here, and it's got that sort of feel to it of what I call machine tech, you know. The whole sort of town, apart from the new properties, has got this sort of like what they're calling Jurassic bath stone, but I don't know, I don't know what this stuff is, but in places it looks like petrified wood, and I'll show you some of that, examples of that, as we go on. So we didn't look at very much of the town, we just sort of like concentrated on a small part of it. And I'm going to go back because there are some areas that I'm really interested in. There's a church there called St Lawrence's Church, which dates back to the 800s, they're saying. Which I don't know. It's like it's got some strange architectural features, so I want to go back and look at that and sort of what looks like what they call Tartarian, classic sort of Tartarian. That's the station from the bridge, and here's a little closer shot of the station from the bridge. And there's a lot of railway stations look like this, especially in the country. So here we are in Bradford itself, and this is the sort of look of the houses. There's a sort of like very square look to them all. It was a lovely day apart from the chemtrails, which were just all day, and they were just spread all across the sky. It was quite unpleasant. And here's a building with down below, and look how old this sort of stonework is here. I don't know, I didn't see a date on here. This was in the main street, and I just sort of got my camera out. Look how old this sign is. There's a bit of this around. I don't know if it's all repro stuff they've put up for effect or if it is the real thing, but very sort of gnarly looking buildings. And there's roadwork sort of pretty much all over the place here. That's quite an interesting building with a nice sort of armorial feature on it. I'm not sure what that building was. I was a bit unprepared for the buildings we were going to see, to be honest. And this next one coming up, really like this next one. This is like some old forge, and it was almost falling to pieces, the state of it. So I think it had just been left there. And this place here is a vet's, and they must be pretty upmarket in Bradford, because the vets. I know they make money. That's what was going on in the sky. It's quite ghastly, isn't it? Not at all nice. And this is an example of one of the modern buildings there, which looks to me as if it was just been clad. It's just been revamped and clad. And just a closer look here at the cladding, or whatever it is that they use. And it's all underneath as well. And they wouldn't have dug it down. It was already down, and they've redone it up. So we came to this sort of park area, and there was a community orchard called the Hen's Orchard, where people can pick the apples in the autumn. There's a Green Man Festival there on Saturday the 14th of May. I might go, but might get a bit touristy. And here's the bit of canal that we were sat sort of next to having a ciggy, and my daughter took the dog into the water. He wasn't too happy about that. There's a bridge that was going over it, and there's a lot of canoeists there as well. It was like a sort of bit of an area for canoeing. And we went down this bit to look at this Tithe barn, which is an ancient monument. And as soon as you hear words like National Lottery funding, ancient monument, national trust and things like that, you know that they're lying, and this is a special place. And just look at this ancient old stone here. So we go into this barn thing, and here's the outside of it, looking for all the world like a church, like an old church to me, and not a barn, or some old sort of like feasting hall or something. You can see here the remains of the original archway over the door, which was much higher, and it's massive inside, massive. I think it's something like 180 foot or metres, God I can't remember, 180 foot long and 30 foot wide. And there was nobody in there but us, which was nice. But it's huge. A barn? Why would you be building a barn like this? They're dating it to the 1300s. Still got its old cobbled floors here. That's probably what they say is a Roman coffin. Lots of little inserts in the wall. The roof is, and here's what I'm talking about. This stuff on the walls here. They were all over these stones, and a lot of them have been sanded back over the years, and they're real, like sacred geometry. But it's like something out of Game of Thrones, like some huge, great big feasting hall or something. And it has got a sort of an ecclesiastical, religious feel to it. But we know that was later on, after these buildings were repurposed by the Roman Catholic Church. So whatever it may have been originally, I don't know. The roof was redone in the 1950s, but it must have cost a fair bit of money and had some good craftsmen to get this one together, because it's quite spectacular. These places have just been stripped bare, really, of anything that can identify them as anything. And I was interested in this sort of like rugged floor. I mean, why would you have this sort of rugged floor here? And I think I come across some more of those geometric shapes in a minute. There's a little bit of history with a photograph of it in the 50s when they started the repair work. So it was just stood there falling to pieces, I guess. The 1950s seems to have been a time in Wiltshire for doing it up, because they did Stonehenge up around that time, the 1950s. So I think that they were getting it all together, getting this sort of like tourist Britain together back then, post-war. The Britain that we know and love today, with its National Trust devotees who are willing to sort of like spill you a load of narratives. The Ministry of Works repairs. The Ministry of Works. God, it sounds like something out of Brave New World, doesn't it? And here's some of those geometric shapes. You see how they look like the flower of life? And more here. Look at that. And they're really engraved into the walls, and there's a lot of them have been sanded down over the years. So they're not modern. There are little bits of sort of graffiti here and there. In one place somebody's put 1066, but I strongly suspect that's a joke. But yeah, they're almost, can you see this? It's quite extraordinary. I can't understand why anybody will be putting... They're not mason's marks. A mason wouldn't be putting things like that. And then there's all these holes where wood must have gone through at some point. Lots of them. There was something in these sort of recesses at some point. And these little bits in here. And there's some more of those incisions. 16, is that 1086? 1066? And more of it. Flower of life geometry inside all over the stone. I wonder what they say about that. It's got like a very rough, shod, hard, mudded down floor. And this stuff here looks like petrified wood to me. Do you see this? This here. So there wasn't really a lot to look at unless you look close at the brickwork, and then you could see that it was a lot of graffiti. 1632, that might be original. 1153 above it. Who knows? My daughter desperately trying to keep off camera. Lovely old door. Yeah. And this is sort of like quite sort of, oh God, I've forgotten the word. An example of the sort of stone that they use here. But this floor, you see it? I don't know if it's wood that's been petrified, because it's just ridged. It was all like ridged. Here's some more of those markings. They could be mason's marks, who knows? I don't know, I just didn't get that feel from the stone at all, and more of that strange geometry. It was bizarre, genuine tree of life in one area. Here's an old stone wall outside that does look like it's got water damage on it. I think that they sand down a lot of these buildings. Here it is, sort of looking at it from a different sort of perspective outside. And there's examples of this sort of stonework, arches, all over the place. All over the place. This has had a new wooden beam put across the top. And this is where we clambered up the verge to reach the canal. And it was a bit tricky because I had flip-flops on, but I made it despite my arthritis. Hole in the tree on the way up. And when we got to the top, the canal was ahead of us with lots of very, very nice barges. And that was the first one we saw, which was quite good. A lot of people living on these barges down here. It's sort of like a little bit of an urban area of the canal, as people were parked up. And this particular canal had all these really, really interesting panels on. I think it was either an old canal, an old barge, or they'd found these panels and put them on afterwards. But it has some interesting Venetian type people, and in fact the boat is called Venetian but with an X for the T. And then we came across this mummy duck with a real assortment of chicks. She had what looks like to be farmyard ducklings as well. And I got quite stressed because she's up on the embankment at this point, the mother duck, and some of them are trying desperately to get up to her. But she does come down into the water. You see, she's got yellow ducklings, and she's got we could hear this rustling in the verge, and it was the mummy duck. So we can see this is a bargie's barge with all his stuff. I got talking to this lady and her son here. She was selling bits and pieces by the canal to fund a trip, trying to fund a trip to Spain, so we bought a couple of bits. People like to do the surreal. They sort of dress their barges up. It was great, it was lovely. And they can moor there for a couple of days, I think, and then they have to move, but they don't have to move far, they can just move up a little bit. It was makes me want to crave that sort of freedom. I was chatting to the lady and she was saying how much she enjoys it. And here's the lock up at Bradford. And they were so a boat had just gone through, a barge had just gone through, but I managed to sort of film a little bit of the lock filling up again on the other side, just here. See the old stone again? It's just all stone around here. Here it is. So what I'm going to do is probably look up a little bit more history on this place. It isn't from Wikipedia. Maybe get talking to a few people, what reparations are in there. But it seems strange to me that we had to walk up this massive verge to get to the canal. Very much like railway lines, which tells me a lot of railway lines are just filled in canals. Very pretty house there, just stood by itself. Really pretty. And here's my daughter in the cafe. And here's me in the cafe, my good side. And my good side. Anyway, thanks for watching, just short and sweet, and I'll try and get a little bit more together next time.